Chosen ones, right now someone is drowning in their own lies, and they're about to confess the most devastating truth about what they've orchestrated against you. But this isn't just any confession. This is the complete unraveling of a psychological warfare campaign so sophisticated, so calculated, that when you understand its full scope, you'll realize you weren't just surviving random drama. You were being tested by the universe itself, and you passed with flying colors while your attacker destroyed themselves in the process. Here's what's happening right now. There's someone sitting in complete terror, knowing they can no longer hide behind the elaborate fiction they created about your character. The weight of their deceptions has become so crushing that maintaining the lies requires more energy than they possess. They're experiencing what psychologists call cognitive collapse, when the mental effort required to sustain false narratives exceeds human capacity. But here's the hook that's going to blow your mind. Their confession isn't coming from guilt or genuine remorse. It's coming from raw, primal fear, because they've discovered something about you that changes everything. They've realized they didn't just attack a regular person, they declared war on someone connected to forces beyond their comprehension. And now those forces are responding in ways that make their original plan look like child's play. The confession they're about to make will reveal 3 devastating truths. First, every accusation they made about you was a projection of their own toxic nature. Second, their entire campaign was motivated by jealousy of abilities they couldn't understand or replicate. And third, this is the part that's keeping them awake at night. Their attacks actually activated dormant powers within you that have made you more successful, more magnetic, and more spiritually connected than you've ever been. What you're about to discover begins with their obsession, escalates through systematic deception, reaches a breaking point with explosive exposure, and concludes with their complete surrender to forces they never should have challenged. By the end, you'll understand not just what they did, but why the universe allowed it to happen, and how it served your highest evolution. This actually started months or even years before you realized you were under attack. This person had been watching you with the intensity of a predator studying prey, but what they were really witnessing was something that both fascinated and terrified them: your natural connection to universal flow. They watched you manifest opportunities that they had been struggling to achieve for years. They saw doors open for you that remained stubbornly closed for them. They witnessed people gravitate toward your energy in ways that seemed effortless and magnetic. What they didn't understand was that they were observing someone whose spiritual gifts were beginning to activate, someone whose soul was remembering its divine nature. Here's where the obsession became dangerous. Instead of recognizing your gifts as something to celebrate or learn from, they interpreted your success as something stolen from them. In their twisted logic, the universe was a zero-sum game where your wins meant their losses. They began to believe that if they could tear you down, your blessings would somehow transfer to them. The confession reveals they started documenting everything about your life with disturbing precision. They studied your relationships, your patterns, your vulnerabilities, and most importantly, they identified the people whose opinions mattered most to you. They were building a psychological profile, not to understand you, but to destroy you more effectively. What makes this even more sinister is their confession about using modern technology as a weapon against you. They're admitting to creating deepfake images and manipulated photographs using advanced editing software. They learned Photoshop techniques specifically to create false evidence of conversations, meetings, and interactions that never occurred. The level of technological sophistication they employed reveals this wasn't just emotional manipulation. This was digital warfare designed to gaslight you into questioning your own reality. They're confessing they created fake social media profiles, not just to spy on you, but to manufacture evidence of relationships and behaviors that existed only in their twisted imagination. They would screenshot innocent interactions, edit them out of context, and present them as proof of your alleged misconduct. They even went so far as to create entirely fictional conversations, complete with fabricated timestamps and manipulated metadata, designed to convince others that you had said or done things that never happened. The technological aspect of their deception goes even deeper. They're admitting they studied your digital footprints, your online habits, your communication patterns, all to better impersonate you in fabricated scenarios. They learned to mimic your writing style, your vocabulary, even your typical response times, so they could create fake messages and emails that appeared to come from you. This level of digital identity theft was designed to make their lies so convincing that even people who knew you well would begin to doubt your character. But here's the first major plot twist. While they were busy studying your external life and creating elaborate digital deceptions, they completely missed the most important element, your spiritual protection. They saw the effects of your divine connection, but couldn't perceive the source. It was like studying the shadows on a cave wall while remaining oblivious to the fire casting them. Their technological sophistication was powerless against spiritual forces they couldn't understand or manipulate. The obsession reached a tipping point when they realized that simply watching your success was driving them into deeper psychological instability. They began having fantasies about different outcomes, scenarios where you failed instead of succeeded, where you were isolated instead of celebrated, where you experienced the same feelings of inadequacy and rejection that consumed them daily. What their confession reveals next is perhaps the most disturbing element of their psychological profile. They began involving family members and children in their campaign against you. If there were children connected to your situation, whether through shared custody, family relationships, or close connections, they weaponized these innocent souls as pawns in their psychological warfare. They're confessing they deliberately created conflict around children's well-being, using parental instincts and protective emotions as manipulation tools. They would plant suggestions that you were somehow harmful to children's emotional development, that your energy was unstable around young ones, or that your lifestyle choices were setting poor examples. They knew that any perceived threat to children would trigger the most primal protective responses in the adults who cared about these young souls. The confession reveals they specifically targeted moments of family gathering, holidays and special occasions, times when emotions run high and family dynamics are most vulnerable to manipulation. They would create emergencies or concerns that required immediate attention during these precious moments, ensuring their toxic energy contaminated even your most joyful family experiences. But here's where their plan backfired spectacularly. Children and young people often possess natural spiritual sensitivity that adults have learned to suppress. The very children they tried to use as weapons against you often sensed something wrong about this person's energy. Kids would become uncomfortable around them, avoid them instinctively, or even openly express that they didn't like this person without being able to articulate why. The universe's protection of innocence is absolute, and their attempts to involve children in their spiritual warfare brought swift and severe karmic consequences. They began experiencing problems with children in their own life, behavioral issues, emotional distance, and a general sense that the young people around them were pulling away from their energy field. This is when the obsession transformed into action. They didn't just want to see you fail, they wanted to be the architect of your failure. They wanted to play God with your reality, to prove to themselves and the universe that your success was undeserved and could be taken away by someone clever enough to engineer your downfall. What makes their confession so chilling is the revelation of how systematically they built a network of manipulation around you. This wasn't impulsive jealousy or random toxicity. This was psychological warfare executed with military precision. They started by identifying your closest relationships and studying the dynamics within each one. They learned your partner's insecurities, your friend's triggers, your family's concerns. They became a student of human psychology, not to heal or help, but to weaponize emotional vulnerabilities against you. The confession reveals they began positioning themselves as the concerned observer in multiple relationships. To your partner, They appeared as the friend who noticed things about your behavior. To your friends, they became the voice of reason expressing worry about your well-being. To your family, they positioned themselves as someone who cared enough to speak up about troubling changes they claimed to see in you. But here's where their plan reveals its first fatal flaw. They underestimated the intelligence of the people around you. While some initially bought into their carefully crafted narratives, others began sensing something off about the messenger. The same intuitive gifts that drew people to you in the first place started triggering warning signals about this person's motivations. The manipulation escalated when they realized that subtle suggestions weren't working fast enough. They began creating evidence to support their claims about your character. The confession reveals they manipulated photos, fabricated conversations, and even created fake social media interactions designed to make you appear guilty of behaviors that existed only in their imagination. Each lie required 10 more lies to support it. Each fabrication demanded increasingly elaborate explanations. They found themselves caught in a web of deception so complex that maintaining consistency required spreadsheets and detailed notes. They were becoming the very thing they accused you of being: manipulative, deceptive, and obsessed with controlling others. The confession reveals a particularly disturbing pattern. They specifically targeted your romantic relationships with surgical precision. If you were in a partnership, they systematically planted seeds of doubt about your faithfulness and commitment. They would create scenarios designed to trigger your partner's deepest insecurities, feeding them carefully crafted stories about your alleged behaviors when you weren't around. They're admitting they studied your partner's history with relationships, their past traumas, their specific triggers around trust and abandonment. Then they weaponized this psychological profile against both of you, creating false emergencies and manufactured crises designed to test your relationship's breaking point. They would fabricate stories about you being seen with other people, create fake evidence of secret communications, and even stage situations where your partner would accidentally discover planted evidence of your supposed infidelity. But their manipulation went beyond just creating false narratives. They're confessing they actively worked to isolate you from potential romantic connections by spreading rumors in your social circles before relationships could even develop. They would reach out to people you were interested in or who were interested in you, presenting themselves as concerned friends with important information about your character or past behaviors. The most twisted part of their romantic sabotage involves their confession about creating love triangles and manufactured competition. They would present themselves as a better alternative to your current partner, or as someone who really understood you in ways others couldn't. They were trying to position themselves not just as the destroyer of your relationships, but as the solution to the problems they had created. What they never understood is that authentic love connections are protected by the same spiritual forces that guard your overall path. Every relationship they destroyed was either not meant for your highest good, or the interference actually strengthened the connection by revealing its true foundation. Their attacks on your romantic life served as a filtering system, ensuring that only people capable of seeing through deception would remain in your energy field. The most disturbing revelation in their confession involves how they studied your spiritual practices and beliefs, not to understand or connect, but to use your own spirituality against you. They learned about energy work, manifestation, and spiritual protection specifically so they could convince others that you were using these practices harmfully. Here's where this takes a turn that most people would find hard to believe, but as a chosen one, you'll recognize the truth immediately. Their confession reveals they didn't limit themselves to psychological manipulation. They engaged in full-scale spiritual warfare against you. They researched and employed various forms of spiritual attack, convinced they could drain your energy, block your manifestations, and sever your connection to divine guidance. They performed rituals designed to bind your success and redirect your blessings to themselves. They enlisted others in their spiritual attacks, convincing these people they were helping to balance your energy or teach you necessary lessons. But here's what they never understood about spiritual warfare: it only works against people who aren't under divine protection. Every spiritual attack they sent your way was met by forces so far beyond their comprehension that their negative energy was not only neutralized, but transformed into fuel for your spiritual growth. The confession reveals they began experiencing what can only be described as supernatural resistance. Their attacks would start with confidence and momentum, only to dissolve into confusion and failure through circumstances they couldn't explain. Technology would malfunction when they tried to create false evidence. Their lies would be exposed through impossible coincidences. Their plans would backfire in ways that seemed orchestrated by invisible forces. They started having dreams that terrified them, visions of you surrounded by beings of light, protected by energies that made their attacks look like throwing pebbles at a mountain. They would wake from these dreams with physical symptoms, nausea, headaches, and a crushing sense of dread that seemed to seep into their bones. The spiritual warfare escalated when they realized their initial attacks were failing. They sought out more powerful practitioners, spent money they couldn't afford on services designed to harm you, and even traveled to different locations to perform rituals they believed would be more effective. Each escalation brought more severe consequences back to them. Here's the mind-blowing revelation from their confession. They began to suspect they were fighting something much larger than just you. They started feeling like they were under surveillance by forces they couldn't see or understand. Synchronicities began appearing in their life that felt like warnings. They would see the same numbers repeatedly, encounter the same symbols in random places, and experience coincidences that felt like messages from an intelligence far beyond human comprehension. Their confession reveals the most shocking discovery of all. They weren't just dealing with spiritual resistance. They were experiencing what can only be described as divine intervention in their daily life. Technology would malfunction specifically when they were trying to create false evidence against you. Their phones would crash when taking screenshots of fabricated conversations. Their computers would freeze when editing photos to frame you. Their internet would go down precisely when they were trying to post defamatory content about you online. The supernatural interference escalated beyond technology. They started experiencing what they describe as impossible coincidences that seemed designed to expose their lies. They would tell someone a fabricated story about you, only to have that person encounter evidence contradicting their narrative within hours. They would plant false evidence in one location, only to discover it had mysteriously disappeared or been replaced with something that revealed their deception. Even more disturbing for them was the way their own secrets began surfacing whenever they tried to expose yours. Every time they attempted to damage your reputation, information about their own questionable behavior would somehow leak into their social circles. It was as if the universe was maintaining perfect balance. For every lie they told about you, a truth about them would be revealed to others. They're confessing they began having physical manifestations of their spiritual warfare that terrified them. They would wake up with unexplained bruises after performing rituals against you. They would experience sudden illness immediately after casting negative intentions your way. Their reflection in mirrors began looking distorted to them, as if their own energy was becoming so toxic it was affecting their physical appearance. The most frightening revelation in their confession involves their growing awareness that their attacks weren't just failing, they were being redirected back to them with surgical precision. Every curse they attempted to place on your relationships would manifest in their own love life. Every obstacle they tried to create in your career path would appear in their professional journey. Every moment of isolation they wished for you would become their lived reality. They started researching spiritual protection and karmic return, desperately trying to understand what forces they had unknowingly challenged. The deeper they dug into spiritual laws and cosmic justice, the more they realized they had declared war on someone under divine protection, and divine protection was winning decisively. What happens next is when their carefully constructed house of lies begins collapsing at an accelerating pace. The confession reveals this wasn't a gradual unraveling, it was a sudden, catastrophic exposure that left them scrambling to control damage that had already spiraled beyond their ability to manage. It started when people they had manipulated began comparing notes about the stories they'd been told. Inconsistencies emerged that couldn't be explained away. Details changed between tellings. Timelines didn't match up. Evidence they claimed to have seen mysteriously disappeared or never existed in the first place. The confession reveals the exact moment when their main target, the person they had turned most successfully against you, began asking uncomfortable questions. This person started demanding proof, wanting to see the evidence directly, insisting on details that exposed the fabricated nature of the accusations. The house of cards began tumbling when they couldn't provide what didn't exist. But here's where the story reaches its most dramatic peak. The exposure didn't happen through investigation or detective work. It happened through spiritual revelation. The person they had manipulated most successfully began receiving dreams, intuitive insights, and synchronistic messages that revealed the truth about who was really the toxic presence in their life. The confession details their horror as they watched relationships they thought they controlled through deception begin turning against them. The same people who had believed their lies about you started seeing them clearly for the first time. The energy around their deceptions became so heavy and discordant that even non-spiritual people began feeling uncomfortable in their presence. Their panic reached crisis levels when they realized that several people had been documenting their lies from the beginning. Some had been taking screenshots, others had been recording conversations, and a few had been comparing notes about inconsistencies they'd noticed. What they thought was a secret campaign was actually being observed and documented by witnesses they never knew existed. The final blow came when they discovered that some of their supposed allies had never believed them at all. These people had been playing along, gathering information and waiting for the right moment to expose the truth. They realized they had been surrounded by people who saw through their deceptions but chose to watch them destroy themselves rather than intervene. What makes this betrayal even more devastating is their confession about the financial and legal consequences that began mounting against them. Some of their manipulative tactics crossed legal boundaries, and people began documenting evidence for potential lawsuits. The fake social media profiles they created could be considered identity theft. The manipulated images and fabricated conversations could be classified as defamation or harassment. The spiritual attacks they enlisted others to perform could be considered conspiracy to commit emotional harm. Their confessing they never considered the legal ramifications of their actions because they were so consumed with their obsession to destroy you. But several people they had manipulated began consulting attorneys about the psychological damage caused by being unwitting participants in their deception campaign. The network of people who had been fed false information about you started recognizing they had been manipulated and used as weapons in someone else's vendetta. The financial consequences began mounting as they faced potential legal fees, settlements, and the cost of damage control. But even worse than the money was the social exile they began experiencing. Word spread through their circles about their manipulative behavior, creating a reputation for toxicity that followed them everywhere they tried to establish new relationships or professional connections. They're admitting they tried desperately to control the narrative as it shifted against them, but they discovered that lies have a shelf life, while truth has eternal staying power. Every attempt to justify their behavior or minimize their actions only provided more evidence of their manipulative nature. They found themselves caught in the same web of deception they had woven around you, but without the spiritual protection that had shielded you from lasting harm. The confession reveals their complete psychological breakdown when they understood the full scope of their exposure. Not only had their lies been revealed, but their motivations, methods, and even their spiritual attacks had been discovered and documented. They weren't just caught lying, they were caught engaging in systematic psychological and spiritual warfare against an innocent person. The very people they had convinced to turn against you were now turning against them with the fury of people who realized they had been manipulated and used. The most humiliating part of their exposure was discovering that their obsession with you had become public knowledge. People began seeing them not as a victim of your alleged toxicity, but as someone whose jealousy and obsession had driven them to extraordinary lengths of deception and manipulation. They had become a cautionary tale about what happens when envy transforms into spiritual warfare. Now we reach the point where they find themselves in a state of complete surrender, not because they've found genuine remorse, but because they've encountered forces that have completely overwhelmed their ability to continue their attacks. The confession reveals they're not just admitting to their lies, they're begging for mercy from consequences that have become unbearable. They're experiencing what spiritual traditions call karmic return. Every negative intention they sent your way has returned to them amplified. The isolation they tried to create for you has become their reality. The reputation damage they attempted to inflict on you has attached itself to them instead. The spiritual attacks they launched have rebounded with such intensity that they're living in constant fear and anxiety. The confession details how their life has become a series of obstacles and setbacks that mirror exactly what they tried to create for you. Opportunities they pursue suddenly disappear. Relationships they tried to build are undermined by their own toxic patterns. Projects they start fall apart through circumstances beyond their control. They're experiencing firsthand what it means to live without divine protection and guidance. Their confession reveals the most pathetic aspect of their current situation. They're now desperately trying to undo the spiritual damage they've caused, not out of genuine remorse but out of terror at the escalating consequences. They're consulting spiritual practitioners, paying for cleansing rituals, and even traveling to different locations, seeking help from anyone who might be able to stop the karmic avalanche they've triggered. But every spiritual practitioner they consult tells them the same thing. They attacked someone under divine protection, and the only way to stop the consequences is through genuine repentance and making amends. The problem is, their confession reveals they're not truly sorry for hurting you. They're only sorry they're facing consequences for hurting you. Their attempts at spiritual cleansing fail because their motivation is self-serving rather than genuinely remorseful. They're confessing they've tried everything from elaborate apology letters they never sent, to expensive spiritual ceremonies designed to balance the karma, to even reaching out to your mutual connections hoping someone might advocate for mercy on their behalf. But the universe doesn't respond to manipulation, even when it's disguised as spiritual practice. The most revealing part of their confession involves admitting they've been having recurring nightmares where they see you surrounded by beings of light, protected by forces that make their attacks look like throwing stones at a mountain. In these dreams, they hear a voice that tells them they have two choices: genuine transformation through acknowledgement of their wrongs, or continued escalation of consequences until they learn their lesson. They wake from these dreams knowing that every day they delay taking responsibility is another day the karmic pressure builds. They're caught in a spiritual pressure cooker of their own making, where the only release valve is complete honesty and genuine repentance, two things their ego is desperately trying to avoid. But here's the most powerful part of the resolution. While they've been drowning in the consequences of their actions, you've been ascending to levels of success, peace, and spiritual power that exceed anything you experienced before their interference. Their attacks didn't just fail to harm you, they activated dormant potentials within you that might have taken years to develop naturally. The confession reveals their growing awareness that they may have been unwitting instruments in your spiritual evolution. Every attack forced you to develop stronger boundaries. Every lie exposed taught you to trust your intuition more deeply. Every moment of isolation connected you more profoundly to your divine source. They tried to break you, and instead broke you open to your true power. Your success isn't just returning to previous levels, it's surpassing anything you'd experienced before their interference. It's as if the universe compensated you for their attacks by accelerating your blessings and opportunities. New doors opened that were bigger and better than the ones they tried to close. New relationships entered your life that were deeper and more authentic than those they tried to destroy. New levels of spiritual awareness activated that transformed their attempts at psychological warfare into advanced training in discernment and protection. The confession reveals their growing awareness that they may have been unwitting instruments in your spiritual evolution. Every attack forced you to develop stronger boundaries. Every lie exposed taught you to trust your intuition more deeply. Every moment of isolation connected you more profoundly to your divine source. They tried to break you and instead broke you open to your true power. They're confessing now that they can see the energy around you that they were blind to before, the light, the protection, the spiritual authority that marks you as someone chosen for a specific purpose. They understand why nothing they did could truly harm you, why every attack made you stronger, and why their own lives began falling apart the moment they decided to interfere with your journey. The final element of their confession involves acknowledging that you were always innocent of everything they accused you of. Every intuition you had about their character was accurate. Every boundary you tried to set was justified. Every moment when you felt something was wrong but couldn't prove it, you were receiving divine guidance about the spiritual warfare being waged against you. Hold that thought for a moment. I need your attention for something very important. We're revealing everything we know about personal power, healing yourself, and healing others through weekly Zoom call. No filters, no holding back. We have been quietly adding all the occult secrets we've collected over literal years of spiritual practice. The techniques and wisdom that transformed us from controlled pawns into conscious creators are now available to those ready to walk the same path. This is your invitation to join Obsidian Inner Order and support our platform so we can continue growing our megaphone to reach other chosen ones waiting for activation. By joining the Obsidian Inner Order, you're not just gaining access to forbidden knowledge, you're becoming part of a movement that's rewriting reality itself. It's a 360 win for all of us. Link is in the description. As we return to where this began, everything has been transformed by what has unfolded. What began as an attack designed to destroy you has become the catalyst for your greatest spiritual activation. The obsession that was meant to diminish your light has only made it shine brighter. The lies told about your character have been so thoroughly exposed that your integrity now stands beyond question. The person who confessed to orchestrating this campaign against you thought they were playing chess, but they were actually arranging the pieces for your coronation. Every move they made to diminish your power actually served to reveal it more fully. Every attempt to isolate you from your support system led you to discover the unlimited support available from divine sources. Their confession marks the end of one phase of your journey and the beginning of another. You now stand vindicated, not just in human terms but in cosmic terms. The universe itself has testified to your innocence through the complete collapse of every lie told against you. You've been tested by forces of deception and manipulation, and you've emerged victorious without compromising your integrity or descending to their level. The confession they've made doesn't change who you are, it simply provides official confirmation of what the universe always knew. You are a chosen one, protected by divine love, empowered by cosmic justice, and destined for greatness that no human manipulation can prevent or diminish. Their acknowledgement of this truth is their surrender to forces they never should have challenged. As you move forward from this vindication, you carry with you not the wounds of their attacks, but the wisdom gained from surviving spiritual warfare. You've developed discernment that can't be fooled, boundaries that can't be breached, and a connection to divine protection that can't be severed. You've been forged in the fire of deception and emerged as pure gold. What appears to have been your darkest chapter was actually your greatest initiation. The person who tried to write your tragic ending instead authored your triumphant beginning. Their confession isn't just an admission of guilt, it's a testimony to your spiritual invincibility. You stand now as living proof that chosen ones cannot be diminished by human manipulation, that divine protection is real and active, and that the universe will use even the attacks of your enemies to serve your highest good. Their confession is complete, their surrender is total, and your vindication is absolute. The truth has set everyone free, including them, though they may not understand that gift for years to come. As for you, chosen one, this confession marks not an ending but a beginning, where your power is no longer hidden and your purpose is no longer questioned. You have been tested by darkness and emerged as light. You have been attacked by lies and proven to be truth itself. Their confession confirms what you always knew deep in your soul. You are innocent, you are protected, and you are destined for extraordinary things that no amount of manipulation could prevent you from claiming. The universe has spoken through their admission, and the message echoes across all dimensions. You are a chosen one, and your time has come.